The sun had not yet broken the horizon when Ethan Walker opened his eyes. This was how he lived now. Awake before guilt could find him. Awake before the dreams turned to memories and the memories turned to knives in his chest. Arizona Territory, June 14th, 1885. A Thursday. Not that days of the week mattered much out here where the way stretched wide and empty and asked nothing of a man except that he survive. Ethan sat up on his narrow cot feet, finding the rough wooden floor. The cabin was small. One room, a stove in the corner, a table, two chairs, though he never had company except Jake Morrison, and Jake brought his own comfort with him in a way that made the second chair feel less like a reminder of loneliness. He dressed in the half-dark, canvas pants worn soft from years of use, cotton shirt, suspenders. The motions were automatic, mechanical. He had learned long ago that routine was armor against thinking too much. On the small table beside the door sat a photograph. Face down. It had been face down for 3 years now. Sometimes Ethan's hand would reach for it, would hover there in the early morning silence, wanting to turn it over and look at the face captured in that moment of joy. But he never did. The boy in that photograph was gone. Looking at him would not bring him back. Ethan pulled on his boots and stepped outside into the cool morning air. The sky was beginning to lighten in the east, painting the distant mountains in shades of purple and gold. His horse, a Mustang stallion he called Ash, stood in the small corral beside the cabin. The animal lifted its head at the sound of the door, ears pricked forward. 17 rounds, the thought came unbidden as Ethan checked his Winchester Model 1873 rifle, a habit from his cavalry days. He never needed more than 3. In 8 years of carrying this weapon, he had fired it in anger exactly twice. Both times the target had gone down with the first shot. He walked to the corral and climbed over the fence. Ash came to him, nuzzling his shoulder. Ethan ran his hand down the horse's neck, feeling the warmth of the animal's body, the solid realness of muscle and bone. "You are all I got, boy." The words formed in his mind but did not reach his lips. Out here, a man could go days without speaking. Sometimes Ethan would talk to Ash just to hear a human voice, even if it was his own. And you do not ask questions. That is why you are the smart one. The horse snorted softly as if in agreement. Ethan filled the water trough from the well, checked the fence line around a small property, and by the time the sun crested the horizon, he had settled into the rhythm of another day alone. Then he heard the sound of hooves on the hard-packed earth of the road. Jake Morrison rode up leading a pack horse loaded with supplies. Jake was 43 years old, weathered by sun and hard living, but his eyes were still sharp and his handshake still honest. He had been a Texas Ranger before he came to Arizona, and he carried that authority in the way he sat his saddle, easy but alert. "Morning, Hermit," Jake's voice carried across the morning stillness. "Brought your flour and coffee. You planning to come to town any time this year?" Ethan walked to meet him at the fence line. "Town has got nothing I need." Jake swung down from his horse with practiced grace. "Town has got people. You remember people? Those creatures that talk back." A small smile tugged at the corner of Ethan's mouth, the first expression his face had made in days. "That is why I avoid them." Jake tied his horse to the fence post and began unloading supplies. His movements were efficient, economical. He had brought flour, coffee beans, tobacco, the necessities of frontier life. He set each item on the ground with care. "Heard there has been trouble near the Apache land." Jake's tone had shifted, become more serious. "Riders at night. Thomas Graywolf's people are nervous." Ethan's hand stilled on the bag of flour he was lifting. "Not my problem." Jake stopped and looked at him directly. "It is everybody's problem. You live 5 miles from their border. When trouble comes, it does not respect fence lines. I respect their boundaries. That is all I can do. That lonely coat of yours is going to get you killed one day, Ethan. Or worse, leave you regretting you did not act." The words landed like a blow. Ethan's jaw tightened. "I know about regret, Jake." Jake's expression softened immediately. "I know you do, brother. Just keep your eyes open." "That is all I am saying." They finished unloading in silence. When Jake mounted his horse to leave, he paused and looked back. "You are a good man, Ethan Walker. I wish you believed that." Then he was gone, dust rising behind his horse as he rode back toward his own ranch, 10 miles east. Ethan stood at his fence line long after Jake disappeared from view. The land stretched out before him in all directions. To the west, 5 miles distant, was the boundary of Apache territory. He had learned the markers in his first year here. Stones arranged in patterns, paint on certain trees, invisible lines that meant everything. Thomas Gray Wolf had told him once early on, when Ethan was still finding his place in this harsh country, a man who respects boundaries respects himself. Ethan had not understood then. He understood now. Out here, your word and your fence line were the only laws that mattered. Break one, and you might as well break both. By midday, the heat had settled over the land like a blanket. Ethan saddled Ash and rode out to check his fence line near the wagon road. This was where town traffic passed, where freight wagons hauled goods between settlements, where the occasional stagecoach rattled by raising dust. It was also where animals sometimes wandered into the road, where children from the Apache camp sometimes played too close to danger. Ethan had been riding this fence line twice a week for 3 years. Some men might have called it excessive. Ethan called it necessary. The barbed wire was still relatively new technology out here. The locals called it the devil's rope. It had changed the West-made boundaries real, in a way that had never existed before. Made lines men could not cross without bleeding. As he rode, Ethan noticed the Apache boundary markers to his north, stones painted with symbols, a twisted juniper tree with red cloth tied to its branches. These were the old ways, the traditional methods of marking territory that predated barbed wire by centuries. He never crossed those lines without invitation. In 3 years, he had been invited exactly once when Thomas Gray Wolf's nephew had broken his leg and needed help getting home. Ethan had carried the young man to the border and no further. Thomas had nodded in approval, had offered him water, and that had been that. Respect was earned through action, not words. The sun was directly overhead when Ethan heard the sound. At first, it was just a faint noise carried on the wind. Children playing, perhaps. Laughter, the high, bright sound of young voices. Then silence. Abrupt. Total. Then a scream. Ethan's body went rigid. His hands tightened on the reins so hard his knuckles went white. The scream came again, high-pitched and terrified, and something inside Ethan's chest cracked open. Wyoming, 1877. A different road, a different day, but the same sound. The same terror. No, not again. He did not think. Thinking got children killed. He kicked his heels hard into Ash's sides, and the Mustang exploded forward muscles, bunching and extending as they raced toward the sound. The wagon road came into view, and there, standing in the middle of it, frozen like a deer caught in lantern light, was a little girl. She could not have been more than 5 years old. Dark hair, dark eyes wide with fear, wearing a simple cotton dress that marked her as Apache, and bearing down on her wheels churning dust was a freight wagon pulled by a 4-horse team. The driver was slumped forward, drunk or asleep, or simply not paying attention. The horses were at full gallop, their momentum carrying them forward with the inexorable force of an avalanche. Ethan calculated without conscious thought. 80 yards, 6 seconds. Ash could cover 40 yards in 3. He would have to grab her at full gallop, something he had done exactly twice in his cavalry days, both times successfully but barely. The alternative was not acceptable. He spurred Ash harder, and the Mustang gave him everything. The distance closed. 60 yards, 40, 20. The little girl saw him coming, and her eyes grew even wider. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. 10 yards. Ethan leaned out of the saddle, arm extended. This was the cavalry trick, the one that broke men's shoulders if they got it wrong. Grab and roll, using the horse's momentum to swing clear. 5 yards. His hand closed around her small body. She weighed almost nothing. He pulled her against his chest and rolled sideways out of the saddle, hitting the ground hard with his shoulder and rolling, keeping the girl protected against his body as they tumbled into the brush at the side of the road. The freight wagon thundered past wheels, missing Ethan's head by inches. He felt the rush of air, smelled horse sweat and whiskey, heard the driver shouting something that might have been a curse or a prayer. Then silence again. Ethan lay on his back in the dust, the little girl clutched against his chest. Both of them were breathing hard. She was shaking, tiny tremors running through her body. "You are safe." The words came out rough, his voice rusty from disuse. "I got you. You are okay." Behind them, the freight wagon had finally stopped. The driver, a Mexican teamster, stumbled down from his seat. His face was pale beneath his sun-darkened skin. He stared at Ethan, and the girl crossed himself quickly and then without a word climbed back onto his seat and whipped the horses into motion. Ethan watched him go, saying something would accomplish nothing. The man knew what he had almost done. That knowledge would follow him the rest of his days. The little girl was crying now, quiet sobs that shook her small frame. Ethan sat up carefully, keeping her close. His shoulder ached from the fall, but nothing felt broken. "You are safe, sweetheart." He had not used that word in 8 years. Had not called anyone sweetheart since Tyler. "I got you. You are okay." She looked up at him with those enormous dark eyes, tears making tracks through the dust on her cheeks. "I was chasing the rabbit." "I know." Ethan found himself stroking her hair, a gesture that came from somewhere deep and long buried. "I know." She studied his face with that particular intensity children possess, seeing things adults miss. "You saved me." Ethan could not speak. He just nodded. "What is your name, Ethan Walker?" "I am Emma." She sniffled, wiping her nose on her sleeve. "Mama is going to be mad I left camp." Despite everything, Ethan felt a small smile. Maybe a little. "But she will be glad you are okay. Can you show me where your mama is?" Emma pointed north toward the Apache land. "That way." Ethan stood lifting her with him. His legs felt unsteady. She weighed perhaps 40 pounds, but in his arms she felt impossibly heavy with the weight of what had almost happened. Ash had stopped a dozen yards away and stood waiting, ears pricked forward. "Good horse." Ethan walked to him and lifted Emma onto the saddle, then swung up behind her. They rode slowly toward the Apache boundary. Emma sat in front of him, her small hands gripping the saddle horn. She had stopped crying but still trembled, occasionally aftershocks of fear working their way out of her body. "You are not Apache." Her voice was small but curious. "No, I'm not. Mama says some white men are bad. Your mama is smart. Some are." Emma tilted her head back to look at him. "Are you bad?" Ethan thought about that question. About all the ways a man could be bad without meaning to be. About sins of omission and the weight of failure. "I try not to be. Your horse is pretty. What is his name?" "Ash. Like the tree, like what is left after a fire." Emma was quiet for a moment, processing this. "But things grow after fires. Thomas says so." The words struck something in Ethan's chest. He looked down at this small girl who had just said something profound without knowing it. Thomas is wise. As they approached the Apache camp, Ethan felt his body tense. He had lived near these people for 3 years, but had never entered their territory beyond that one time with the injured nephew. This was crossing a line, and lines mattered. But Emma had been on that road. She would have died. Some lines had to be crossed. The camp came into view. Traditional wickiups arranged in a circle, their frames of willow poles covered with canvas and brush. Women working animal hides. Men sharpening tools. Children playing. Everyone stopped what they were doing when they saw Ethan. Two young warriors stepped forward immediately, hands moving toward the knives at their belts. Their faces were hard, suspicious. An older warrior, perhaps 50 years old, with silver streaking his long black hair, raised his hand. "Stop there, white man." Ethan reined Ash to a halt at the edge of the camp. He kept his hands visible, made no sudden movements. In broken Apache learned during his cavalry days, he said the words for child and danger and road. Then he switched to English. "I bring the child. She was on the road. Wagon almost." He could not finish the sentence, could not say the words that would make it real. The older warrior studied him with eyes that had seen too much. "You are Walker, the scout who lives near the boundary." "Yes, you have crossed into our land." "I had to. She would have died." The warrior's expression did not change, but something shifted in his eyes. "You could have left her. No witness. Why risk because I once did not?" The words hung in the air between them. Before the warrior could respond, a woman emerged from the largest wickiup. She was perhaps 32 years old, wearing a traditional Apache dress of deerskin decorated with beadwork. Her hair hung long and loose down her back. She carried herself with a particular kind of grace that spoke of both strength and authority. She saw Emma and her face went white. Then she was running. She spoke in Apache words tumbling over each other too fast for Ethan to follow. She reached up and took Emma from his arms, checking the girl for injuries with quick, practiced movements. Finding none, she pulled Emma against her chest and held her tight. Emma was crying again now, the fear finally releasing its hold. "Mama." The rabbit ran and I followed, and the big wagon. "Hush, my heart." The woman rocked, her eyes closed. "Hush. You are safe." Then she opened her eyes and looked up at Ethan. For 5 full seconds, neither of them spoke. The entire camp watched in silence. An elderly man stepped forward from the group. He was perhaps 67 or 68, tall and lean, his face weathered like old leather, his hair white as snow. He wore traditional clothing but moved with the authority of someone accustomed to respect. Thomas Greywolf. Ethan recognized him from that one previous encounter 3 years ago. Thomas spoke in Apache to the woman who was still holding Emma. The woman responded, still looking at Ethan, and switched to English mid-sentence. "He saved my daughter." Thomas studied Ethan the way a man studies a horse he is considering buying. Measuring, evaluating. "You are the soldier who left the cavalry." Former scout. Not soldier. There is a difference. Scouts find trails. Soldiers make graves. Something like approval flickered across Thomas's face. "You could have left her. Wagon would pass. No witness." Why risk? Ethan repeated what he had said to the other warrior. "Because I once did not." Thomas and the woman exchanged a long look. Some communication passed between them that Ethan could not read. The woman stood still, holding Emma on her hip. She was taller than Ethan had first thought, nearly his own height. Her eyes were dark and intelligent, and held depths he could not fathom. You did not ask who she was. Her English was flawless, with only the slightest accent. You did not wait for permission. You just acted. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. "It was not a choice, ma'am. Everything is a choice." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a weight that made even Thomas listen. "I am Sarah Whitehorse, widow of Black Eagle, who fell 4 winters ago. This is Amama, my daughter, and you have created a debt I cannot ignore." "No debt, ma'am, I just—" Thomas interrupted, his voice formal. "Among our people, a life saved creates a bond. You will be told what this means. Sarah Whitehorse will speak with elders. You will return in 3 days. I do not need— It is not about what you need." Thomas's tone left no room for argument. "It is about what is owed. In 3 days. Ethan looked from Thomas to Sarah. She was still watching him with those penetrating eyes, Emma's small arms wrapped around her neck. 3 days. Ethan heard himself agree. He turned ash and rode slowly back toward his own land. At the boundary, he looked back once. Sarah was still standing there watching him. Emma had turned in her mother's arms and waved a small hand. Ethan lifted his hand in return, then rode home. That night, sleep would not come. Ethan lay on his narrow cot, staring at the rough wooden ceiling. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Emma's face. Her dark eyes wide with terror, her small body frozen in the road. And behind that image always was another face, another pair of eyes. Tyler. Finally, Ethan gave up. He lit the lantern and sat at his small table. The photograph was still there, face down. For the first time in 3 years, he reached for it with the intention of turning it over. His hand hovered above it. Trembling slightly, he picked it up and turned it face up. 3 people looked back at him from the fading image. Ethan himself younger, his face not yet carved by grief. His brother Michael, arm around Ethan's shoulders, grinning. And between them, a boy of 6 with dark curly hair and a gap-toothed smile that could light up a room. Tyler James Walker, born March 5, 1871, died July 3, 1877. Ethan traced the boy's face with one finger. The photograph could not capture Tyler's energy, the way he had moved through the world like a small whirlwind. Could not capture his laugh or his endless questions, or the way he had looked at Ethan, like Ethan hung the moon. "I am sorry, Tyler." The words came out as barely a whisper. "I am so sorry." The memory came whether he wanted it or not. Wyoming. The ranch his brother had built with his own hands. A hot July day, Ethan had been home on leave from the cavalry, visiting for 2 weeks. He could see it all as if it were happening now. Tyler running after a ball that had gotten away from him. The ball rolling into the road. Tyler following without looking. Ethan 50 yards away, walking to the barn. Seeing the ball, seeing Tyler, seeing the rider coming fast, not watching where he was going. Ethan had run, had shouted Tyler's name, had stretched his legs to their limit, arms reaching. Not fast enough. The sound of impact, the way Tyler's small body had crumpled. The rider not even stopping, probably drunk, probably not even realizing what he had hit. Ethan had dropped to his knees beside his nephew. Tyler's eyes were open but already going distant. blood at the corner of his mouth, his breath coming in short, painful gasps. Uncle Ethan. Tyler's voice had been so small, it hurt. I know, I know. Stay with me, Tyler. Please stay with me. But Tyler had not stayed. His eyes had fixed on something Ethan could not see, and then the light had gone out of them, and Ethan was kneeling in the road holding a body that no longer held the spirit of the boy he loved. Michael had come running from the house, had seen Tyler, had looked at Ethan with eyes that asked a single question. Where were you? Ethan had not been able to answer. He had been right there, 50 yards away, and it had not been enough. The funeral had been brief. Afterward, Michael had found Ethan standing alone near the grave. Where were you? Following orders. The excuse had sounded hollow even then. I was just in the barn. I could not know. Orders. Michael's voice had been cold dead. Your nephew needed you here. Not out playing soldier. Not in the barn. Here. Watching him. Michael, please. Get out. Michael had looked at him with such hatred that Ethan had physically recoiled. You do not get to mourn him. You let him die. You are dead to this family. Ethan had left that day, had not seen or spoken to his brother in 8 years. Now sitting in his cabin in Arizona territory, Ethan set the photograph down. He did not flip it face down this time. Maybe it was time to stop running from Tyler's face. Maybe it was time to remember that the boy had lived, not just that he had died. Outside, Ethan heard the sound of a horse approaching. He glanced at the window. The moon was up nearly full. It was past midnight. No one rode at this hour unless something was wrong. He grabbed his rifle and stepped outside. Jake Morrison was riding up fast. When he saw Ethan, he reined his horse to a stop and swung down. Even in the moonlight, Ethan could see the concern on his friend's face. Heard about what you did. Word travels fast out here. Ethan lowered his rifle. It is nobody's business. You saved an Apache child. Jake's tone was serious. After what happened at San Carlos last year, tensions are high. Some folks are not going to see it as heroic. They are going to see it as choosing sides. I did not choose anything. I acted. That is all it takes sometimes. One action. Jake tied his horse to the fence post. You are involved now whether you want to be or not. I am not looking to be involved in anything. Then why did you do it? Jake's voice was gentle now, not accusing. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. You know why? Jake studied him in the moonlight. Tyler has been gone 8 years, brother. That boy on that road he lived. You cannot change Wyoming, but you changed today. What if I just made it worse? The words came out before Ethan could stop them. What if that bond they are talking about? What if I cannot carry it? Then you do what you did today. Show up when it matters. Jake put a hand on Ethan's shoulder. That is all any of us can do. They stood in silence for a moment. Two men in the darkness of the Arizona night, the weight of the day settling around them. There is something else you should know. Jake's voice had gone hard. Colonel Hale is in town. Ethan felt his entire body go rigid. Hale in Arizona. Rolled in 3 days ago with a surveying crew. Says he is working for the railroad. But he has been asking about Apache land boundaries. And he asked about you. What did he want to know? Where you lived, how long you have been here, whether you have got friendly relations with the Apache. Patrick Hale. The name alone brought a flood of memories, none of them good. Fort Bowie, 1879. The orders to lead Apache families into an ambush. Ethan's refusal. The court-martial that had followed. Hale does not do anything without an angle. That is what worries me. Man like that with railroad money behind him, he did not come all the way to Arizona just to lay track. Jake paused. He came to steal land, and you just made yourself visible. Saving that girl put you on everyone's radar, Hale's included. After Jake left, Ethan did not go back inside. He stood at his fence line looking north toward the Apache boundary, thinking about debts and bonds and the ways one action could ripple outward into consequences he could not foresee. The next morning, Ethan found something at his fence line. A marker, a single eagle feather tied to the fence post with red cloth. He knew what it meant. Among the Apache, this was a summons. You are called. He looked north toward where he knew Thomas Gray Wolf's people lived. The sun was just rising, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Ethan stood there a long time, the feather moving slightly in the morning breeze. Then he went back to his cabin, cleaned himself up as best he could, and waited. At midday, Thomas Gray Wolf appeared at the boundary. He sat on his horse patient and still waiting for Ethan to approach. Ethan saddled Ash and rode to meet him. Sarah Whitehorse has spoken with elders. Thomas's voice was formal. Council has decided. You will come tonight. We will eat. We will speak. And she will make her words. What words? The words that bind. Thomas turned his horse and rode away without waiting for a response. Ethan watched him go. His stomach was tight with something that was not quite fear, but felt similar. He had faced hostile tribes, outlaw gangs, and cavalry charges without this particular kind of nervousness. That evening, as the sun began to set, Jake rode up to Ethan's fence line. He did not dismount. Whatever happens in there, remember this. These people do not give trust lightly. Do not waste it. I will not. I know you will not. That is why I am here, to remind you that you are worth the trust they are about to give you. Jake's expression was serious. Whatever debt you think you owe Tyler, whatever guilt you carry, leave it here tonight. Go in there as Ethan Walker, not as a man trying to make up for the past. Ethan nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He rode toward the Apache camp as darkness fell. The sky was deepening from blue to purple, stars beginning to appear. Smoke rose from cooking fires, and he could smell roasting meat on the wind. At the edge of the camp, Running Deer met him, the older warrior who had first confronted him yesterday. Without a word, he gestured for Ethan to follow. They walked into the circle of wickiups. A fire had been built in the center of the camp, and around it sat the elders. Thomas Greywolf, Running Deer, an ancient man with white hair down to his waist, and two others whose names Ethan did not know. Sarah Whitehorse stood to one side, Emma beside her. The little girl saw Ethan and smiled, waving. Ethan lifted his hand in return, feeling some of the tension ease from his shoulders. The community had gathered at the edges of the firelight watching. This was clearly something significant. Ethan could feel the weight of their attention. Thomas stood. He spoke first in Apache, his voice carrying across the gathered people. Then he switched to English, and Ethan understood this was for his benefit. We gather to speak truth. 3 days ago, this man, Ethan Walker, former cavalry scout, saved the daughter of Sarah Whitehorse. He did not ask for a reward. He did not hesitate. He risked his life for a child not his own, from a people not his own. Among our people, such an act creates debt. But more, it reveals character. Running Deer spoke next. I fought cavalry for 40 years, killed many, never trusted white man. But honor is honor, no matter the color of the skin. The ancient elder gray feather rose slowly. His voice was thin, but carried surprising strength. A life saved is a life owed. This is the old way, the true way. Walker has proven himself through action. Actions speak when words deceive. Then Sarah stepped forward. She carried herself with a particular dignity, and Ethan realized that she was not simply respected in this community. She held real authority. She spoke in Apache, first addressing the elders. Then she turned to face Ethan directly and switched to English. Among our people, when someone saves a life, the saved person belongs to the saver. But my daughter is mine to protect. So the debt falls to me. She paused. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the darkness, a dog barked once and fell silent. Ethan Walker, you saved my daughter. By our tradition, by the bond that was created in that moment of courage, I make this declaration before elders and before the Great Spirit. Sarah's voice rang out clear and strong in the night air. You saved my child. Now I am yours. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the fire seemed to burn more quietly. Ethan felt every eye on him waiting for his response. Ma'am, I do not understand what that means. It means I pledge my loyalty, my family's protection, my counsel, my voice in this community for you, should you need it. Sarah's eyes never left his face. You are no longer alone. You are, Thomas finished for her. You are one of us, if you choose to be. Ethan dismounted from Ash and stood facing the circle of elders. His mind was racing, but his body was still. I do not deserve this. I did what any man should do. Gray Feather spoke. You did what many men would not. I have a past. The words came hard. I failed someone once. A child. My nephew. I was not there when he needed me, and he died. I came here to escape that, to hide from it. Sarah's voice cut through his confession, firm but not unkind. Then stop hiding. You saved Emma. That is truth. What happened before that is the past. This bond is about who you choose to be now. Thomas stepped forward. Do you accept this bond? Understand it is not ownership. It is alliance. Partnership. Sarah Whitehorse speaks for you in our council. You speak for her in the white man's world. You protect each other. Ethan looked at Emma, who was watching him with those enormous dark eyes. She was smiling, completely unaware of the weight of what was happening. He thought about Tyler, about 8 years of running from guilt, about the photograph he had finally turned face up last night, and he thought about showing up, about being present, about choosing to try rather than choosing to hide. I do not know how to be part of something anymore. Sarah's expression softened slightly. Then learn. We will teach you. What if I fail? What if I let you down, then you try again? That is what family does. The word hung in the air. Family, a concept Ethan had abandoned 8 years ago, when Michael told him he was dead to them. He took a breath and spoke the words that would change everything. I accept. The meal that followed the ceremony was unlike anything Ethan had experienced. The elders invited him to sit with them around the fire, a place of honor he had not expected. Women brought food on wooden platters, roasted venison, corn cakes, something that looked like bread but tasted of mesquite and honey. Sarah sat across from him, Emma between them. The little girl had attached herself to Ethan with the easy affection of children who do not yet understand the complexities adults create. She smiled at him every few minutes as if checking to make sure he was still there. You eat funny. Emma's voice carried in the quiet that had settled over the gathering. Ethan paused his knife halfway to his mouth. I eat funny. You hold your knife wrong. Sarah touched her daughter's shoulder gently. Emma, do not be rude. But he does, despite the solemnity of the evening, despite the weight of the bond he had just accepted. Ethan laughed. It was a real laugh, genuine and unforced, the first in longer than he could remember. You are right, my mama tried to teach me manners, never took. Emma studied him with that particular intensity children possess. Where is your mama? She died. Long time ago. My first mama died too. The words fell into the space between them like stones into still water. Sarah's head snapped toward Emma, surprise evident on her face. Ethan saw something flash across Sarah's features. Pain. Fear. A secret revealed before its time. I'm sorry to hear that. Ethan kept his voice gentle. It is okay. Emma looked at Sarah with such pure love that it made Ethan's chest ache. I have Mama Sarah now. Ethan watched the way Sarah pulled Emma close, the way her hands smoothed over her daughter's hair with unconscious tenderness. There was a story here, layers he did not understand, but it was not his story to ask about. Not yet. After the meal, Thomas gestured for Ethan to walk with him. They moved away from the fire toward the edge of the camp, where darkness gathered beyond the reach of the flames. For a long time, they walked in silence. This was the Apache way Ethan had learned. Words came when they were needed, not before. You carry a heavy stone in your heart. Thomas's voice was quiet but clear. That obvious? To me, yes. I too carry stones. Lost my son in cavalry raid. Wife to white man's sickness. Daughter to... He did not finish the sentence and Ethan did not press. I am sorry, we all carry stones. Question is, do we let them make us heavy or do we use them to build something? How do I do that? By showing up, by being present. Thomas stopped walking and turned to face Ethan directly. Sarah Whitehorse is a strong woman, but she is alone. Emma needs a father figure. You need purpose. Maybe you all need each other. I do not know how to be a father. No man does, until he is. They walked back to the fire together. The gathering was beginning to break up, families returning to their wiki-ups. Sarah stood with Emma, who had fallen asleep against her mother's shoulder. Thank you, Sarah's voice was soft, for accepting, for not running. I spent 8 years running. Ethan looked at the sleeping child. Maybe it is time to stop. The ride back to his cabin felt different somehow. The night air was the same, the stars were the same, but Ethan felt changed in ways he could not yet articulate, as if something that had been locked tight inside him had begun just barely to open. When he reached his property, he noticed something immediately. Fresh tracks in the dirt near his cabin. Multiple horses. Someone had been here while he was at the Apache camp. Ethan dismounted slowly, his hand moving to the rifle in his saddle scabbard. He approached the cabin with caution born of years on the frontier where carelessness got men killed. The door was slightly ajar. He had closed it before leaving. He was certain of that. Ethan pushed the door open with the barrel of his rifle and stepped inside. Nothing was obviously taken. His few possessions were still where he had left them. But there were subtle signs, drawers that had been opened, papers that had been moved. Someone had searched his cabin. On his small table, weighted down with a stone, was a piece of paper. Ethan lit the lantern and read. The words were typed formal, businesslike. Mr. Walker, I understand you have become acquainted with certain indigenous neighbors. As a representative of the Arizona Territorial Development Company, I would like to discuss mutually beneficial arrangements regarding land acquisitions in your area. I will be calling on you soon. Respectfully, Colonel Patrick Hale. Ethan's hands tightened on the paper, crumpling the edges. Patrick Hale, the man who had ordered him to lead Apache families into ambush at Fort Bowie. The man who had court-martialed him when Ethan refused to follow an immoral order. The man who had destroyed Ethan's military career and sent him wandering for 3 years before he finally settled here in Arizona territory. And now Hale was here, in Arizona, asking about land acquisitions, about the Apache. Nothing good ever followed where Patrick Hale went. Ethan did not sleep that night. He sat at his table, the lantern burning low, thinking about bonds and debts and the way the past never stayed buried, no matter how deep you dug the hole. The next morning arrived gray and overcast, unusual for June in Arizona. Clouds had moved in overnight, thick and heavy, promising rain that might or might not come. Ethan was checking his fence line when he heard the sound of a buggy approaching. Expensive, well-maintained. Not the kind of vehicle common out here where most men rode horses or drove functional wagons. 3 men rode up in a fine black buggy pulled by a matched pair of bay horses. The driver wore a suit that looked Eastern. Expensive fabric. Clean, despite the dust of the road. He was perhaps 50 years old with silver hair and a neatly trimmed beard. His eyes were sharp and calculating. Colonel Patrick Hale stepped down from the buggy with practiced grace, as if he were arriving at a gentleman's club rather than a rough frontier cabin. Behind him, 2 other men remained in the buggy, surveyors by the look of their equipment, or guards pretending to be surveyors. Ethan Walker. Hale's voice was smooth-cultured with just a hint of Southern accent. It has been, 6 years, 8, and not long enough. Ethan did not move from where he stood at his fence line. Hale laughed, a practiced sound that carried no real humor. Still bitter about Fort Bowie, I am bitter that you ordered me to lead women and children into an ambush. Yeah. The memory came sharp and clear. Fort Bowie, 1879. Ethan had been ordered to escort a group of Apache families north under a flag of truce. Safe passage they had been promised. But Hale had known there was a Comanchero gang in the canyon ahead, had planned to let them attack the Apache, then send cavalry to attack the Comancheros. 2 problems solved, Hale had said. They are hostiles anyway. They are surrendering, Ethan had replied. Non-combatants, families. You have your orders, Scout. Ethan had refused. The court-martial had followed within days. Conduct unbecoming insubordination. Dismissed from service with dishonor. The fact that the Apache families had survived because Ethan warned them had counted for nothing in the official record. Let us not dwell on the past. Hale's smile was practiced empty. I am here about the future. Get off my land. Your land. Hale's tone became sharper. Funny, according to territorial survey, this parcel's boundaries are disputed. In fact, your deed may not be valid. My deed is registered in Tucson. Registrations can be challenged, especially when railroad interests are involved. Hale gestured vaguely toward the horizon. But I am not here about your land. I am here about theirs. He pointed north toward the Apache territory. That is treaty land, protected. Hale laughed again, and this time there was real amusement in it. Treaties are words on paper. Paper burns. He paused, letting the threat hang in the air. I have been authorized to acquire that land by negotiation, legal challenge, or other means. Or what? Let us just say the U.S. government has a history of finding reasons to relocate indigenous populations, especially when they are deemed threatening to settlers. They are not threatening anyone, not yet. Hale's smile was cold now, all pretense of civility dropped. But incidents can be arranged. A few dead cattle, some burned property, perhaps a settler or 2 gets hurt. These things happen on the frontier, and when they do, the cavalry comes. You remember how that ends? Do not. You scout Ethan's hand move toward his gun, almost without conscious thought. Hale noticed immediately but seemed unconcerned. Go ahead, shoot an unarmed man in front of witnesses. That will help your Apache friends tremendously. Hale turned to his companions. Gentlemen, let us go. Mr. Walker needs time to think about which side he is on. As they climbed back into the buggy, Hale paused and looked back. Oh, and Ethan, I heard about your heroics. Saving that little girl. Very touching. Be a shame if something happened to her. Accidents do occur on the frontier. Ethan's voice came out deadly calm, each word measured. Hale, if you touch that child or any of them, I will kill you. That is not a threat. It is a promise. Hale's smile widened. There is the soldier I remember. See you soon, Scout. The buggy drove away, leaving Ethan standing alone at his fence line. His heart was pounding, adrenaline surging through his system. The casual way Hale had threatened Emma, the calculated malice in every word. This was not about land. This was personal. Hale had not forgotten Fort Bowie, had not forgotten that Ethan had defied him and saved those Apache families. This was revenge wrapped in railroad business and territorial expansion. Ethan did not wait. He saddled Ash and rode hard for the Apache camp. Thomas Gray Wolf met him at the boundary. The elder took one look at Ethan's face and gestured for him to follow. The council convened quickly in the largest wickiup. Thomas Running Deer Gray Feather and two other elders whose names Ethan still did not know. Sarah was there as well, standing against the wall with her arms crossed. Emma was not present. Ethan told them everything. About Hale, about Fort Bowie, about the railroad company and the surveying crew, about the thinly veiled threats. The railroad has wanted our land for years. Running Deer's voice was hard. They cannot take it. We have treaty. Hale does not care about treaties. Ethan leaned forward, urgent. He will create an incident. Make it look like you attacked settlers. Then the cavalry comes. It is what he did at Fort Bowie. I have seen this before. Gray Feather spoke slowly. Then we fight. You cannot win that fight. Ethan's voice was flat honest. I have seen what happens when cavalry come in force. You need another way. What do you propose? Sarah's question cut through the murmuring that had started among the elders. We need legal protection. If your land is on the railroad route, we need to prove it is more valuable to keep you here. Tourism trade agreements, something that makes removing you more costly than the railroad is worth. Thomas studied Ethan carefully. You know this white man's legal ways, no. But Jake Morrison does. He was a Texas Ranger, and we need a lawyer, a good one. This will take time. Sarah's voice carried worry. What if Hale acts first? Then we need to watch him, track his men, know what he is planning before he does it. Ethan met her eyes across the wickiup. I can do that. You would do this? Risk yourself against your own kind. They are not my kind. The words came without hesitation. You are. The council meeting ended with agreement to bring Jake Morrison into their confidence and to begin documenting everything they could about Hale's activities. Ethan rode back to his cabin feeling the weight of what he had committed to. This was no longer about saving one child. This was about protecting an entire people. That night, fire lit up the southern sky. Ethan saw it from his porch, a red glow against the darkness, too large to be a cooking fire, too sustained to be an accident. He saddled Ash and rode toward it, his heart already knowing what he would find. Jake Morrison's warehouse was burning. By the time Ethan arrived, a dozen men were trying to fight the flames with buckets of water drawn from the creek. Jake himself was on his knees near the fence line, blood running from a cut above his eye. His Mexican workers were tied up nearby, bruised and beaten. Ethan dismounted and ran to his friend. Jake looked up, his face a mask of fury and pain. 4 men wore masks. Set the fire, beat my crew left this. Jake held up something that glinted in the firelight. An Apache arrowhead, obviously planted. Hale, yeah, and he is just getting started. Ethan cut the ropes binding Jake's workers and helped them to their feet. One had a broken arm, another was bleeding from the head. All of them had the look of men who had been beaten for sport, not in a fair fight. Thomas Gray Wolf arrived moments later with 6 Apache men. They had seen the fire from their camp. Without a word, they joined the effort to control the flames. For an hour, Apache and white men worked side by side, passing buckets of throwing dirt, doing everything they could to save what could be saved. By dawn, the fire was out. Jake's warehouse was a smoking ruin, but the flames had not spread to the nearby buildings or the grassland beyond. The sheriff will come. One of Jake's workers, a man named Miguel, spoke through split lips. They will say Apache did this. Jake nodded grimly. He is already on his way. I sent my boy to town last night. Sheriff Dalton is bringing a posse at sunrise. Thomas looked at the planted arrowhead, then at the remains of the warehouse. This is the beginning. The incident Hale spoke of. We have maybe 6 hours. Ethan's mind was racing. We need to prove it was not you before that posse gets here. How Sarah had arrived with Heck Thomas, Emma left safely back at camp with other women. Hale's men wore masks. There are no witnesses. Yes, there are. Ethan pointed at the ground. Tracks. Whoever did this left a trail, and I can follow it. The sun was just beginning to lighten the eastern sky when Ethan, Sarah, and Jake rode out following the tracks left by Hale's men. Thomas had wanted to send Apache warriors, but Ethan had convinced him it would look worse if they were found tracking anyone. Better for it to be 2 white men and 1 Apache woman who had every right to investigate an attack being blamed on her people. The trail was easy to follow. Hale's men had been confident, careless. They had ridden hard away from the warehouse, heading west toward the mountains. After 2 miles, the tracks led to a camp hidden in a small canyon. Ethan dismounted and approached on foot, gesturing for Sarah and Jake to stay back. He crawled to the edge of the canyon rim and looked down. 6 men, a tent, supplies, and most damning of all, a table spread with maps and documents. He crawled back to Sarah and Jake. They are there. We need to get closer. See what is on those maps. That is suicide. Jake's voice was harsh whisper. 6 against 3. Then we wait until dark. Ethan looked at the sky. We have time. They spent the day watching the camp from concealment. The men below were relaxed, confident. They had no idea anyone was tracking them. Near midday, a buggy arrived. Ethan felt his jaw tighten. Patrick Hale stepped down from the buggy and joined his men at the table. Even from this distance, Ethan could hear laughter, the sound of men celebrating a success. As darkness fell, the camp below lit lanterns. The men settled around a fire, passing a bottle. Their voices carried up the canyon walls, but the words were indistinct. Now, Ethan looked at Sarah and Jake. We go now while they are drinking. They moved like ghosts down the canyon wall. Ethan's cavalry training came back to him, muscle memory of how to move silently across hostile ground. Sarah moved with equal silence, her Apache heritage teaching her skills Ethan had learned through hard practice. They reached the edge of the camp. The tent was 20 feet away. The maps were still spread on the table. Ethan pointed. Sarah nodded. They moved together while Jake stayed back with the horses, ready to provide covering fire if needed. The maps were detailed surveys of Apache land, railroad routes drawn in red ink, notations in neat handwriting. Acquisition timeline 6 months. Relocation forcible if necessary. Another document listed payoffs to territorial officials. A third outlined the plan to create incidents that would justify military intervention. Sarah was reading over his shoulder, her breath quick and angry. This is proof, yeah. Now we just need to get it out of here. A voice behind them, cold and amused. Need to what? Leave. Ethan turned slowly. Patrick Hale stood 5 feet away, a pistol in his hand. Behind him, 3 of his men had emerged from the darkness, rifles aimed. You always were a good tracker, Ethan. Shame you are using those skills for the wrong side. The only wrong side is yours. Ethan's hand moved toward his gun, but Hale's pistol was already trained on his chest. Sarah Whitehorse, I presume. Hale's attention shifted to her. The widow who started this mess. You should have taken my offer last month. What offer? The one where I paid you to convince your people to sell. You refused, called me. Hale pulled a paper from his pocket and read. A snake in fine clothes. Poetic, really. Let us go, Hale. We have evidence. The sheriff will see. The sheriff is in my pocket, along with the territorial judge. Hale's smile was cold. You think this is the first time I have done this? I have been removing obstacles for railroad companies for 10 years. You are just another obstacle, Ethan. So what now? You kill us. Kill an Apache woman and a known Apache sympathizer. Found shot near evidence of planning an attack. Hale shrugged. Makes my job easier, honestly. You will not get away with... A gunshot cracked through the night. Not from Hale, from the canyon rim above. Jake's voice echoed off the stone walls. Next one goes through someone's skull. Confusion rippled through Hale's men. Ethan did not wait. He drew his pistol and fired in one smooth motion, hitting one of Hale's men in the shoulder. Not fatal, but enough to drop him. Move Ethan grabbed Sarah's arm, and they ran. Gunfire erupted behind them. Jake was providing covering fire from above his rifle, cracking rhythmically. Ethan and Sarah ran for the horses, bullets kicking up dust around their feet. They reached the horses and mounted in one fluid motion. Jake was already riding hard down from the rim. Together they galloped away from the canyon, Hale's furious shouts echoing behind them. It does not matter. Hale's voice carried even over the sound of hoofbeats. Posse comes at dawn. Your people are finished. They rode through the night, not stopping until they reached the outskirts of town. The sky was beginning to lighten in the east. In a few hours, the posse would ride out to arrest Apache men for an attack they did not commit. We need someone to believe us. Jake was breathing hard, his horse lathered with sweat. Not the sheriff. He will not go against Hale. The newspaper. Sarah's voice was urgent. Town has a newspaper. That journalist from back east, Martin Fletcher. He hates corruption. It was a desperate plan, but it was all they had. Martin Fletcher lived above his newspaper office in a small room that smelled of ink and tobacco. He answered the door in his nightshirt, bleary-eyed and confused. But when he saw the urgency on their faces, he let them in without question. They spread the documents on his printing press. Maps, payoff lists, written plans to create false incidents. Everything they had taken from Hale's camp. Fletcher read by lamplight, his face growing darker with each page. This is massive. Railroad fraud plan, forced removal, falsified incident. He looked up at them. You understand what this means. If I print this, I am making an enemy of very powerful people. If you do not print it, innocent people will be arrested, probably killed. Ethan met the journalist's eyes. Today, the posse rides at sunrise. Fletcher looked at the documents again. Then he looked at his press, calculating. By dawn, impossible. Press takes hours to set. What if we had help? Sarah's voice was quiet but determined. Fletcher stared at her. You would help even though I am. Even though you are white, Sarah's smile was bitter. Yes, because this is not about who is white or Apache. This is about right and wrong. Within an hour, Fletcher's small shop was full of people. Jake's Mexican workers, bruised but determined. Several townspeople who distrusted Hale and his Eastern money. And 2 Apache men Thomas had sent moving quietly through the pre-dawn darkness. They worked together, setting type-loading paper, running the press. Fletcher shouted instructions. Jake's workers, some who could barely read, learned to set type by matching letter shapes. The Apache men hauled paper and ink with tireless energy. As the sun rose, the first copies came off the press. The headline was stark and damning. Railroad conspiracy exposed, developer, Hale plans forced Apache removal through false flag attack. By the time the posse rode into town, 200 copies were ready. Sheriff Dalton led 20 men, all armed, all serious. They rode in formation down the main street, heading for the Apache land. They were prepared for conflict, possibly for bloodshed. Ethan stepped into the street to block their path. Jake stood beside him, Sarah on his other side. Behind them, Martin Fletcher and a dozen others. We are here to arrest members of the Apache band for arson and assault. Sheriff Dalton's voice carried authority. Step aside. Read this first, Sheriff. Ethan held up one of the newspapers. Fletcher moved through the posse, handing papers to each man. Some could read, others looked at the maps and documents reproduced on the pages and understood enough. Sheriff Dalton read slowly, his weathered face growing stormy. These are serious accusations. They are all true. Jake stepped forward, and we have the original documents to prove it. A commotion at the edge of town announced another arrival. Patrick Hale's buggy moving fast. He stepped down, his face flushed with anger when he saw the newspapers. Sheriff, do not listen to these lies. Whatever they told you is slander. Sheriff Dalton folded the newspaper carefully and tucked it into his coat. Colonel Hale, I am going to need you to come with me. Got some questions about these survey maps and about a warehouse fire last night. This is ridiculous. You cannot seriously believe. I believe in evidence. And right now, the evidence says you got a lot of explaining to do. Hale's face went red. You are making a mistake, Sheriff. I have friends in the territorial government. Important friends. Then they can come bail you out. But right now, you are under arrest for arson, conspiracy to commit fraud, and incitement of violence. As the sheriff's deputies moved to take Hale into custody, another rider approached, a woman wearing the silver star of a U.S. Marshal. She was perhaps 40 years old with steel gray eyes in the bearing of someone accustomed to being obeyed. I am Marshal Kate Brennan out of Tucson. Heard there was trouble brewing. She held up a copy of Fletcher's newspaper. Just read this at the telegraph office. Very interesting. She looked at Hale, then at the sheriff. Colonel Patrick Hale, you are also under arrest on federal charges of conspiracy to defraud the United States government. I will be taking you to Tucson to stand trial. Hale's face went from red to white. As deputies cuffed his hands, he locked eyes with Ethan. This is not over. Yeah, Ethan's voice was quiet but certain. It is. The days that followed were strange. Quiet, as if the land itself was recovering from the violence that had almost been unleashed upon it. Hale was taken to Tucson. His men scattered, the surveying crew disappearing overnight. The railroad company issued a public statement distancing themselves from his methods, though they did not abandon their interest in the land entirely. Jake's warehouse could be rebuilt. The railroad company, desperate to avoid further scandal, offered to fund the reconstruction as compensation for the fire. It was conscience money buying goodwill, but Jake took it anyway. Practical men took what was offered and built from there. Ethan found himself spending more time at the Apache camp, not every day, but often. Emma had taken to him with the fierce attachment of children who recognize safety when they find it. She would run to him when he arrived, telling him about the rabbit she had seen or the bird that had built a nest near her wickiup. Sarah watched these interactions with an expression Ethan could not quite read. Approval, perhaps, or relief, or something more complicated that he was not ready to name. One evening, Thomas found Ethan sitting alone at the edge of camp watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and red. You are good with her. Thomas sat beside him without invitation. She is easy to be good with. And with Sarah, Ethan did not answer immediately. That is more complicated. Only if you make it so. Thomas's voice was patient. The bond, she declared. It has grown beyond tradition. I know. Do not be afraid of it. Life is too short to fear what makes us whole. They sat in silence as the sun dropped below the horizon and the first stars appeared. Somewhere in the camp, a woman was singing. Children laughed. Life continued in its ancient rhythm, unaware of how close it had come to ending. Sarah found him later after Emma had gone to sleep. They walked together toward the boundary fence, the place where they had first really talked the night after the ceremony. When I said, "Now I am yours," I did not know what it would mean. Sarah's voice was soft in the darkness. Neither did I, but I think I know now. It means partnership. It means standing together, not losing ourselves, but choosing to face the world side by side. She paused. Emma asked me yesterday if you were going to be her father. Ethan felt his breath catch. What did you tell her? I told her that families are not just made by blood. They are made by choice, and that you have already chosen us by everything you have done. I failed a child once, the words came hard. I am terrified of failing again. Then do not fail. Choose to stay. Choose to be present. Sarah's voice was firm. That is all any of us can do. Ethan took her hand. It was the first time they had touched beyond the formal gestures of greeting. Her hand was warm and his, calloused from work but gentle. I choose to stay. Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns. The land stretched, wide and dark, and full of promise. And for the first time in 8 years, Ethan Walker felt something that might eventually grow into peace. The weeks that followed brought a strange kind of peace to the territory. Patrick Hale was transported to Tucson to await trial on multiple charges. The railroad company, desperate to distance itself from the scandal, sent representatives who spoke carefully about respecting existing treaties and working within established legal frameworks. The words were empty, Ethan knew, but they bought time. Time was what the Apache needed most. Time to strengthen their legal position. Time to document their history on this land. Time to build alliances with neighboring ranchers who had finally seen the truth of what men like Hale would do to anyone standing in their way. Jake Morrison's warehouse rose from its ashes slowly. Apache men worked alongside Mexican laborers and white settlers, the work creating bonds that words never could. Ethan found himself there most days helping with the heavy timber work his cavalry strength put to practical use. Thomas Graywolf came one afternoon and stood watching the construction. He said nothing for a long time, just observed the men working together. Finally, he turned to Ethan. This is how it should be. Yes. My people have long memories. We remember the broken treaties, the forced marches, the children taken to boarding schools. Thomas's voice was quiet but carried weight. But we also remember those who stood with us when it mattered. You are one of those now. I just did what was right. That is why it matters. Thomas touched Ethan's shoulder briefly, a gesture of respect. Come to camp tonight. We celebrate the first harvest. You are family now. You should be there. That evening, Ethan rode to the Apache camp dressed in his cleanest shirt. The gathering was larger than he had seen before, families from neighboring areas coming together. Fires burned throughout the camp and the smell of roasting corn and meat filled the air. Emma saw him first. She had been playing with other children but broke away immediately and ran to him. Ethan barely had time to dismount before she crashed into his legs, wrapping her arms around him. You came, her voice was bright with joy. I said I would. Emma grabbed his hand and pulled him toward where Sarah stood with other women. Sarah turned at their approach, and Ethan saw something in her face that made his breath catch. Not quite love, not yet, but something deeper than friendship. Something that felt like home. You look nice. Sarah's voice carried gentle teasing. Jake loaned me a decent shirt, said I could not keep showing up looking like a drifter. You are not a drifter. Emma's voice was serious. You are family. The simple certainty in her voice struck something deep in Ethan's chest. Out of the mouths of children came truths adults spent years trying to articulate. The celebration lasted late into the night. Ethan found himself more comfortable than he had expected, sitting with families listening to stories told in a mix of Apache and English. The children had no fear of him now. They ran past him, chasing each other, sometimes pausing to ask him questions about his horse or his rifle, or whether he had ever seen a bear. Near midnight, when most of the children had fallen asleep and the adults sat talking quietly around dying fires, Sarah found him sitting alone at the edge of the gathering. You are thinking too much. She sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Old habit, what are you thinking about? About how strange life is? 2 months ago, I lived alone and spoke to almost no one. Now I am sitting here part of a harvest celebration, and it feels more real than anything has in 8 years. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Do you regret accepting the bond? No. The answer came without hesitation. Not for a second. Good. Because Emma has already decided you are permanent. She talks about you constantly. Ethan this, Ethan that. Drives the other women crazy. Ethan smiled despite himself. She is a special girl. Yes, Sarah's voice grew softer. She lost so much when she was small. Too small to remember clearly, but the loss is there. She needs stability, needs to know the people she loves will not disappear. I am not going anywhere. Sarah looked at him, then really looked at him in the firelight. I know. That is why I can finally breathe again. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the embers of the fires slowly die. The night was cool, and overhead the stars blazed in patterns the Apache had been reading for countless generations. As summer deepened into fall, Ethan found his life developing a rhythm he had never expected. 3 days a week, he worked on his own land, maintaining his cabin and fence lines, tending to the small vegetable garden he had started. The other days he spent at the Apache camp or helping Jake with the warehouse reconstruction. Emma had taken to visiting his cabin in the afternoons, always accompanied by one of the older girls from camp, but increasingly confident in the 2-mile walk. She would sit on his porch and talk about everything and nothing while Ethan worked on whatever task needed doing. One afternoon, she brought him a drawing she had made. It showed 3 figures standing under a tree. The details were crude the way children's drawings are, but the intention was clear. A man, a woman, and a small girl. This is us. Emma pointed to each figure in turn. You, Mama, and me. It is a good drawing. We are a family. Emma's voice carried that absolute certainty children possess. Right, Ethan set down the harness he had been mending and crouched to her eye level. What does your mama say? Emma's face became serious. Mama says families are made by love, not just by blood, and that you love us even though you are quiet about it. Your mama is very smart. So are you, even though you do not talk much. Emma touched his face with one small hand, a gesture of such unconscious affection that Ethan felt his throat tighten. Why do you look sad sometimes? Because I lost someone once, someone I love very much, and I was not there to save him. But you saved me. Yes, I did. Then you should not be sad anymore. Emma's logic was simple, perfect in its childish wisdom. You fixed it. If only it were that easy, sweetheart. It is that easy. You just have to choose to not be sad. Emma hugged him quickly and then ran off to play with Ash, leaving Ethan staring after her with tears he did not quite shed burning in his eyes. That evening, Sarah came to collect Emma. She found Ethan sitting on his porch, the drawing Emma had made laid carefully on the table beside him. She gave you one of her pictures. Sarah smiled. That means you are officially family. She only draws the people she loves. She is wise beyond her years, sometimes. Other times, she is as stubborn as a mule and twice as loud. Sarah sat on the porch steps looking out at the sunset. She asked me last week if you were going to live with us. What did you tell her? That you have your own home, but that does not mean you are not part of our family. Sarah glanced at him. Was that the right answer? It was an honest answer, but not a complete one. Sarah's voice was careful. Ethan, I need to know, is this just responsibility to you? The bond, Emma. Me, are you here because you feel obligated? At first, maybe. Ethan chose his words carefully. I told myself I was honoring a debt, keeping a promise, but that is not why I come back every day now. Why do you? Because when I am here, I feel like the man I was supposed to be before Wyoming. Before I failed Tyler. Before I let guilt turn me into someone who lived half a life. He looked at her directly. I am here because this feels right. You feel right. Emma feels right. All of it. Sarah's eyes glistened in the fading light. I did not expect this. When I made that declaration, I meant it as tradition, a formal bond of gratitude and alliance. And now it has become something I do not have words for. Partnership is too small a word. Family is not quite right either. It is something that does not have a name yet. Maybe it does not need one. Maybe not. They sat together as full darkness fell and the first stars appeared. Inside the cabin, a lantern burned low. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. Life continued in its ancient patterns, heedless of the small human dramas playing out beneath the vast sky. The trial of Patrick Hale took place in October. Ethan, Sarah, and Jake traveled to Tucson to testify. The courtroom was hot and crowded, filled with newspaper reporters and railroad officials and curious citizens who had read about the scandal. Hale sat at the defendant's table looking diminished. Somehow his expensive suit unable to restore the authority he had once carried. When his eyes met Ethan's, there was no threat in them anymore, only bitter defeat. The trial lasted 3 days. Witness after witness testified to Hale's schemes, his bribes, his carefully orchestrated plan to provoke conflict. The documents Ethan and Sarah had taken from his camp were entered into evidence. Martin Fletcher testified about the midnight printing of the newspaper. Jake's workers described the beating and the planted evidence. When it was Ethan's turn to testify, the prosecutor asked him to describe his history with Colonel Hale. Ethan told the truth. All of it. Fort Bowie, the refused orders, the court-martial that had ended his military career. And you hold no personal grudge against the defendant. The defense attorney tried to suggest bias. I hold him accountable for his actions. Personal feelings do not change the facts. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Hale was sentenced to 10 years in the territorial prison at Yuma. As marshals led him away in chains, he looked back at Ethan one last time. You destroyed me. No. Ethan's voice was quiet but carried across the courtroom. You destroyed yourself. I just made sure everyone could see it. On the ride back to the territory, Jake was jubilant. We won. Actually won. We survived. Ethan kept his eyes on the road ahead. There is a difference, Sarah understood. The railroad still wants the land. This just delays things, but delays matter. Jake's optimism was unshakable. Gives us time to build something stronger. Time to show the government that the Apache are not going anywhere. Time was indeed what they had bought. Time and the beginnings of respect from neighbors who had watched an entire community nearly be destroyed by lies. Winter came to Arizona territory with cold winds and occasional snow that melted by midday. Ethan spent more time at the Apache camp during the coldest months, helping to repair wickiups and ensure the elderly had sufficient firewood. Emma turned 6 in January. Sarah marked the occasion with a small celebration, and Ethan brought a gift he had worked on for weeks. A wooden horse carved by hand, small enough for Emma to carry, but detailed enough to show the hours of careful work. Emma's face when she saw it was worth every minute spent with the knife and wood. She named it Little Ash and slept with it beside her every night. You did not have to do this. Sarah touched the carved horse, gently running her finger along its mane. I wanted to. She is going to treasure this for the rest of her life. Good. Ethan watched Emma showing the horse to other children, her voice bright with pride. She deserves treasures. As winter softened into spring, change came quietly but persistently. The warehouse was finished, stronger than before. Jake hired 3 young Apache men to work for him, permanently paying fair wages and treating them with respect. Other ranchers noticed and some followed his example. Thomas Gray Wolf's health began to decline. The elder, who had been so vital and strong, started to move more slowly, to tire more easily. But his mind remained sharp, and he spent long hours with Ethan teaching him about the land, about Apache ways, about the history of his people. One evening as they sat watching the sunset, Thomas spoke of the future. When I am gone, there will be challenges. Some in the tribe still do not trust outsiders. Some never will. I understand, but you have proven yourself. Thomas's voice was firm despite his physical weakness. When the time comes, speak for Sarah in council. She has wisdom and strength, but she is a woman. Some of the older men will not listen to her as they should. That is not right. No, but it is reality. Thomas smiled faintly. You can help change it, slowly, by standing beside her and showing that her judgment is sound. I will. Good. Thomas closed his eyes, tired. You are the son I lost, Ethan Walker. I am proud to have known you. The words settled into Ethan's heart and stayed there, a gift he had not known he needed. Thomas Gray Wolf died peacefully in his sleep on a warm April night. The entire community mourned. The ceremony lasted 3 days, and Ethan stood with Sarah throughout, supporting her as she supported others. Emma cried for the loss of the grandfather figure she had known all her short life. At the burial, Sarah spoke the words of remembrance. Her voice was strong and clear, carrying across the gathered people. Thomas Gray Wolf was a warrior, a leader, a teacher. He fought for his people with weapons when necessary and with wisdom always. In his final years, he showed us that strength is not just in fighting, but in knowing when to build bridges. She looked directly at Ethan. He built one such bridge, and it has held strong. That is his legacy. After the ceremony, as people slowly dispersed, Sarah found Ethan standing at the edge of the burial ground. He loved you like a son. I know. I wish I had known him longer. He knew that too. But he told me once that quality of time matters more than quantity. She took Ethan's hand. You gave him hope in his final year. Hope that our people could find peace with yours. That matters. Spring became summer. The second anniversary of Emma's rescue approached. Ethan found himself thinking about that day more often, remembering the terror and the relief and the strange sense that his life had pivoted on that single moment. Emma was different now, taller, more confident. The trauma of nearly dying had faded into a story she told proudly rather than a nightmare that woke her at night. She had started learning to ride on Ash, and Ethan spent patient hours teaching her how to sit properly, how to hold the reins, how to communicate with the horse through body language rather than force. Sarah watched these lessons from a distance, and Ethan could feel her approval like sunlight. One evening in early June, Sarah asked Ethan to walk with her. They followed a familiar path to the boundary fence, the place where so many of their conversations had happened. Tomorrow is June 14th, I know. 2 years. Sarah's voice was soft. 2 years since you saved Emma. Since I made that declaration. Seems longer somehow. Like my life before was someone else's story. Do you ever regret it? Any of it? Ethan turned to face her fully. Not for 1 second. You and Emma, this community, this life. It is the first real thing I have had since Wyoming. I need to tell you something. Sarah's expression grew serious. About Emma. All right, she is not my biological daughter. Sarah took a breath, and Ethan realized this was difficult for her. My real daughter died when she was 3. Fever. Nothing could be done. My husband and I were broken by it. And then he died too in a raid, and I was alone. I am sorry. Emma's parents died when she was 2. Disease, smallpox swept through their camp. She survived but was orphaned. I took her in, adopted her in the traditional way, raised her as my own. She does not know. Sarah's eyes glistened. I was waiting for the right time to tell her, but there never seems to be a right time. She loves you. That is what matters. I know. but she will have questions someday about why she does not look exactly like me, about her first parents. I worry that knowing the truth will hurt her, or it will help her understand that love is a choice. Ethan touched Sarah's shoulder gently, that you chose her, and that choice is more powerful than any accident of birth. You will stand with me when I tell her, of course. They stood together in the fading light, bound by shared secrets and shared purpose. Tomorrow would mark 2 years, but it felt less like an anniversary and more like a continuation of something that had no clear beginning and no foreseeable end. June 14th, 1887, dawned clear and bright. Emma woke early, excited because Sarah had promised her something special for the day. She did not fully understand the significance of the date, just knew that something important had happened 2 years ago. Sarah had arranged for Emma to spend the morning with other children. She needed to talk to her daughter alone first before they met with Ethan. The conversation she had been avoiding for 2 years could not be delayed any longer. They sat together in the wickiup, just the two of them, morning light filtering through the canvas walls. Emma, I need to tell you something important. Sarah's hands were shaking slightly, but her voice was steady. Okay, Mama. You know how sometimes things are hard to talk about, but they need to be said anyway. Emma nodded, her face growing serious. Like when I broke your water jug and did not want to tell you like that, but bigger. Sarah took her daughter's small hands in hers. Do you remember your first Mama and Papa? Emma's face scrunched in concentration. A little bit. They were sick, and then they were gone. Yes, they died when you were very small, and you were alone and scared, and I had lost my own daughter not long before. We needed each other. Sarah's voice thickened with emotion. So I chose you. I chose to be your mama, and you chose to be my daughter. Emma was quiet, processing this. So you are not my real mama? I am your real mama in every way that matters. I am the mama who raised you, who loves you, who will protect you for as long as I live. But you are right that I did not give birth to you. Your first mama did that. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Did you not want me at first? Oh, my heart. Sarah pulled Emma close. I wanted you more than anything, still do. Every single day. Being chosen is special. It means our love is a decision, not an accident. Emma cried for a while and Sarah held her, rocking gently. When the tears finally subsided, Emma looked up with red-rimmed eyes. Does Ethan know? Yes. Does he think it matters? No. He thinks families are made by love, not blood. Emma was quiet for a long moment. I think that too. She hugged Sarah fiercely. You are my mama, the best mama, and you are my daughter, the best daughter. Sarah kissed the top of Emma's head, always and forever. That afternoon, the three of them rode together to the place where it had all begun. The road where Emma had nearly died, where Ethan had chosen to act rather than turn away. Someone had placed a marker there at some point, a simple stone cairn at the side of the road. Emma did not remember who had built it, but it stood as a quiet memorial to the moment that had changed 3 lives. They dismounted and stood looking at the spot. Emma held both their hands, Sarah on one side and Ethan on the other. This is where you saved me. Emma's voice was quiet. Yes, Mama told me about my first parents, about how she chose me. Emma looked up at Ethan. Did you choose us too? Ethan crouched down to her level. Every day I choose you. Every morning when I wake up and decide to come see you, that is a choice. When I taught you to ride, when I carved you that horse, when I stand beside your mama in council, those are all choices. Good, because I choose you too. Emma's smile was bright despite the tears that had fallen earlier. You are family. They stood together at the roadside as the sun began to sink toward the horizon. A freight wagon passed the driver, nodding respectfully and slowing his horses without being asked. Word had spread about what had happened here 2 years ago. Drivers were more careful now. Do you know what I was thinking that day? Ethan's voice was quiet. Right before I heard you scream, what I was thinking about another little boy who died because I was not fast enough to save him. My nephew Tyler. He was 6 years old like you are now. Emma's hand tightened on his. I am sorry he died. Me too. Every day I am sorry. But that day when I heard you scream, something in me knew I had to run faster, try harder, not fail again. And I did not fail. I saved you. And in a way, you saved me too. How did I save you? You gave me a reason to stop running from my past, to forgive myself, to believe I could be part of something good again. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes. We all saved each other. That is what families do. They stood together until the sky turned gold and red with sunset. Then they rode back toward the Apache camp, three people bound by choice and love and the strange paths that had brought them together. That night, there was another gathering at the Apache camp. Not a formal ceremony, but a celebration marking 2 years of peace, 2 years of the alliance between Ethan Walker and the Whitehorse family. Running Deer, now the eldest among them, after Thomas's death, stood to speak. 2 years ago, an outsider became one of us. Not by blood, but by deed. Not by words, but by action. Ethan Walker has proven himself again and again. He stands with us in trouble. He works beside us in peace. He has earned his place. There was murmuring of agreement throughout the gathered people. Even those who had been skeptical at first had been won over by Ethan's consistency, his quiet reliability, his refusal to seek praise for doing what he believed was right. Later, after Emma had fallen asleep and most of the camp had settled for the night, Ethan and Sarah walked together under the stars. 2 years. Sarah's voice held wonder. It feels like both forever and no time at all. What do you see when you look ahead? At the next 2 years, the next 10. I see you, if that is what you are asking. Sarah stopped walking and turned to face him. I see Emma growing up with a father figure who loves her. I see our people and your people learning to live in peace. I see a life worth living. I see the same. Ethan took both her hands in his. I cannot promise it will always be easy. There will be challenges. People who do not understand or approve. Problems I cannot foresee. I know, but we will face them together. That is what the bond means. She smiled. That is what we have already been doing. Yes, we have. They stood close together in the darkness, not quite kissing, but not quite not kissing, existing in that space where friendship deepens into something more profound than simple romance. They were partners, allies, family in the truest sense. The months that followed brought gradual changes. Ethan expanded his cabin, adding a second room. He did not say what the room was for, but Sarah understood. It was for Emma, for the night she stayed over, for the future that was slowly becoming present. Emma thrived. She was 7 now, smart and bold, and fearless in the way children become when they know they are loved unconditionally. She rode Ash with increasing skill. She helped with chores at both the Apache camp and Ethan's cabin with equal enthusiasm. She talked constantly, her words filling spaces that had been silent for too long. The railroad eventually came, but not through Apache land. The route was diverted south, adding miles but avoiding conflict. It was a compromise, and compromises meant everyone gave up something, but nobody lost everything. Jake Morrison married a widow from town, a practical woman who was not afraid of hard work. The wedding was the first time Ethan saw Apaches and white settlers dancing together at the same celebration. Small steps, but steps nonetheless. Sarah's influence in the community grew. With Thomas gone, the council looked to her more often for guidance. Running Deer supported her openly, and that support carried weight. When difficult decisions needed to be made about trade agreements or boundary disputes, Sarah's voice was heard and respected. Ethan remained in the background as he preferred, but his presence gave her authority she would not have had alone. A woman with the backing of a respected man, especially a white man who had proven his loyalty beyond question, could accomplish things that would have been impossible otherwise. It was not fair. It was not right. But it was reality, and they worked within reality to create change. One evening in late 1888, 3.5 years after the rescue, Sarah came to Ethan's cabin alone. Emma was staying with Running Deer's family for the night. Sarah's expression was serious, and Ethan felt his stomach tighten. Something wrong, though. Sarah stepped inside and closed the door. I just need to talk to you. Really talk without Emma listening or the community watching. Right. They sat at a small table facing each other. The lantern between them cast warm light on Sarah's face, highlighting the fine lines at the corners of her eyes, the silver just beginning to show in her black hair. I think it is time to make a decision. About us. Sarah's voice was steady, but her hands were not. We have been living in this strange in-between space. Not quite together, but not separate either. Emma treats you like her father. The community treats us like a couple. But we have never actually talked about what we are. Ethan had known this conversation was coming, had been both anticipating and dreading it. What do you want us to be? I want what we already have. Partnership, mutual respect, love that is quiet but deep. Sarah leaned forward. I do not need grand romance or flowery words. I need someone who shows up, someone I can rely on, someone who loves my daughter and will stand beside me when things are hard. That is exactly what I want too. Then we agree. Sarah smiled and the tension in the room eased. We continue as we are, but with intention, with acknowledgement that this is a life we are choosing to build together. Do you want to marry? Ethan asked the question carefully. In the white way, I mean. Legal papers and all that. Eventually, perhaps, but not yet. Right now, the bond I declared is enough. We are already committed in the ways that matter. Sarah paused. Unless you need the legal recognition, no. I need you and Emma. The paper does not change anything. Real. Good. Because I have learned that the most important things in life are the ones you choose every day, not the ones you declare once and think are finished. They sealed their understanding not with a kiss, but with clasped hands across the table and a long look that said everything words could not. The years that followed were not always easy, but they were good. Emma grew from a child into a young girl with opinions and dreams and a stubbornness that both frustrated and delighted the adults in her life. She excelled at writing and tracking. She learned both Apache and English perfectly. She moved between both worlds with an ease that gave hope for the future. When Emma was 10, she asked Ethan directly if he was her father. They were working together on his fence line, replacing posts that had rotted over time. You are not my father by blood, but you are my father in my heart. Is that enough? Emma's face was serious, waiting for his answer. Ethan set down his tools and looked at this girl who had saved him as much as he had saved her. It is more than enough. It is everything. Good, because I tell people you are my father. If anyone asks, I am honored. Emma smiled and went back to work. The question settled in her mind with the simple finality of childhood. By 1890, 5 years after the rescue, the territory had changed. Not completely. Prejudice and fear still existed. But the small community around Sarah's camp and Ethan's land had become something different. A place where people judged each other by actions rather than ancestry. Where children played together without seeing color first. Where families helped each other because that was what neighbors did. It was not paradise, but it was better than it had been, and better was enough. On June 14, 1890, Emma insisted they return to the road where it had all started. She was 11 now, almost as tall as Sarah, her childhood face beginning to show hints of the woman she would become. They stood at the cairn of stones, the three of them together, as they had been every year on this date. It had become their tradition, their way of remembering and honoring the day that had changed everything. I barely remember being scared. Emma's voice carried a maturity beyond her years. I remember the wagon. And I remember you grabbing me. And then I remember feeling safe. You were very brave. Ethan's hand rested on her shoulder. I was not brave. I was lucky. Lucky you were there. Lucky you did not turn away. Emma looked up at him. Do you still think about the boss you could not save your nephew every day? But it does not hurt the way it used to. Now when I think of him, I remember the good times more than the end. And I think about how he would have liked you. Really, really. You both had the same kind of energy. The same way of seeing the world, like it was full of possibilities. Emma hugged him tightly and Ethan closed his eyes against the tears that threatened. These were not tears of grief. These were tears of gratitude for the strange path that had led him here, to this moment, to this family he had never expected to have. Sarah watched them with an expression of such profound love that it took Ethan's breath away when he caught her gaze over Emma's head. This was what life was supposed to be. Not perfect, not without pain or loss, but full of moments worth living for. As the sun began to set, painting the Arizona sky in shades of gold and crimson, they stood together at the roadside, a symbol of three lives intersecting in ways none of them could have predicted, a testament to the power of choosing to show up when it mattered. Emma broke the silence with a question that had clearly been on her mind. When I am grown, will you be proud of me? I am already proud of you. Sarah pulled her close. Every single day. And when you have children of your own, someday I hope you tell them this story. Ethan's voice was quiet but firm. Tell them how your mother chose you, how a stranger chose to act instead of walking away, how families are built from love and loyalty, not just blood. I will. I promise. They rode back toward home as darkness fell, three silhouettes against the deepening sky. Behind them, the road lay quiet and empty, marked only by a simple cairn of stones and the memories of what had happened there 5 years before. The land remembered. The people remembered. And in the remembering, they found meaning that transcended the individual moments of joy and sorrow that made up any life. Years later, when Emma was grown and had children of her own, she would bring them to that spot on the road. She would tell them about the day she nearly died and the man who saved her, about the bond her mother declared and the family they chose to become. She would tell them that courage is not always loud, that sometimes the most important actions are the ones taken without expectation of reward, that showing up, being present, choosing to care, these simple things can change the trajectory of lives. And she would tell them that on June 14th, 1885, three people found each other in the dust of an Arizona road, and through that finding learned what it meant to truly be family. But that would be years in the future. For now, on this evening in 1890, they simply rode home together. Ethan Walker, Sarah Whitehorse, and Emma. Not perfect people, but good ones. Not without scars, but healing. Not alone, never again alone, because they had chosen each other when choosing mattered most. The stars came out one by one as they rode. Overhead, the vast Arizona sky stretched infinite and timeless. The same sky that had witnessed countless human stories over countless years. Stories of love and loss, courage and cowardice, failure and redemption. And now this story, simple in its way, profound in its impact. A man who learned to forgive himself by saving a child. A woman who learned to trust again by taking a risk. A girl who learned that family is not about blood, but about belonging. Three lives bound by a moment of courage and a declaration of loyalty. Three lives that proved in the end that sometimes the greatest adventures are the ones that happen when we choose to stay instead of run, to build instead of destroy, to love instead of fear. The land stretched wide around them as they rode, ancient and enduring. It had seen empires rise and fall, had witnessed the passage of peoples and the turning of seasons beyond counting. It would be here long after they were gone, silent witness to the brief flowering of human connection that made all the struggle worthwhile. But for now, in this moment, three people rode home together under the emerging stars, and that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.